where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
This is Friday Java, the October the 25th, 2019 edition. Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin Memorial broadcast booth. We have the people from the University of Virginia, that is at Larry Sabato's shop in Charlottesville, Virginia. And as we usually do, we remember Heber Heyer, who was murdered by white supremacists in that city, in fact, downtown Charlottesville. A blight on the history of people, period. We have two events that are continually unfolding in a transitory manner. In the UK, you have the phenomena called Brexit, the idea of the United Kingdom leaving the EU. And they are still in the process of attempting to leave. Johnson, the PM, has sent a letter asking the EU for more time. And the proposal now is to give to the 31st of January 2020, or whatever date they can come up with. It's before that particular event. And Johnson has also proposed an election in mid-December for a new parliament there, looking at polls that cite his Conservative Party ahead of the Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn. Well, those are some things that are in the air. And then, of course, in the U.S., there's a continual saga involving impeachment in the House of Representatives. We'll get to that in a minute, and the latest escapade there. And also the Attorney General Barr and his Justice Department are investigating the Russian episode, or interference episode. But this is based upon, did members of the FBI, including the director Comey, actually interfere in and attempt to sabotage the campaign of one DJ Trump. Now, this is very interesting in itself. You're asking the Department of Justice to investigate former officials and perhaps officials now of the Department of Justice in the FBI branch and other security services. Now, this is an internal investigation of government agencies by a government agency, and thus it could lead to, and some will say that it already has, the further politicization of the Department of Justice under this bar. Now, that in itself has dialectic elements to it. There are plus and there are minuses to it, depending on how these inquiries turn out. And they're criminal inquiries, incidentally. Of course, it's a criminal inquiry. You have to actually have a grand jury indict someone, and then there's a public trial. And, of course, at that point in time, the two competing pillars of the evidentiary situation come out. There's a prosecution, there's also defense, and a public record there, a long, drawn-out situation. Would that be good for DJ Trump? That's the ultimate question there. And, of course, at the same time, you have the congressional inquiries into various acts of DJ Trump and his cronies and Rudy Giuliani. Now, the problems there, of course, obviously are public opinion, and that's number one. It is basically involving Ukraine, and of course Ukraine being in the sphere of foreign policy. And foreign policy is always very difficult for Americans to get their hands around. And not only that, presidents normally favor domestic policies over policies that are foreign. And then you have the overshadowing of Wilsonian foreign policy, a colonial racist policy that has been practiced by many administrations since Woodrow Wilson, the racist president of, former president at the time, of Princeton University, and his re-segregation or apartheiding of Washington, D.C. Now, these are very important questions. They're historic questions that come forward, and these things cause vexing historical echoes, or in the ekpol. So this in itself is something that is very, very difficult for the American people to digest. There were meetings this week, and of course those meetings in secret. Let me go to this. This is from Reuters, and get my new eyes on here. And this is about Republican lawmakers invading what they call a secure room. Republican lawmakers disrupt Democratic-led Trump impeachment inquiry. Dispatch from Washington, Richard Cowan and Mark Hesselball and Patricia Zajinik. Anyway, Republican lawmakers encouraged by DJ Trump to get tough in fighting Democrats' attempts to impeach him on Wednesday disrupted the House of Representatives impeachment inquiry and prevented a Pentagon official from testifying. They stormed into a hearing room where Laura Cooper, the U.S. defense official who oversees Ukrainian-Russian matters, was due to testify behind the closed doors, and began yelling, and lawmakers and aides said the impeachment inquiry focuses on Trump's requests for Ukraine to investigate Joe Lunchbox Biden for his personal benefit. Dramatic confrontation started with an escalating probe that threatens Trump's presidency, even as he seeks re-election next year. Capitol Police were called in to clear the room and bring order to the situation. A witness inside the room said Republicans brought cell phones into a high-security facility where electronic devices are forbidden. They are freaked out. They are trying to stop this investigation. That is from Ted Lieu, a Democratic representative. They don't want to hear from the witness Cooper today. They know more facts are going to be delivered, which are absolutely damning to the president. Old Mark Meadows told reporters the situation in the hearing room. There are about 20 lawmakers down there, at least a dozen that are not on the three committees, and they're going to wait until there is a more open and transparent process. Republicans call a rule of the impeachment inquiry set by the leaders of the House. The U.S. Constitution gives the House wide latitude in conducting the impeachment process. The witnesses who saw the event said Republican lawmakers pushed past Capitol Police personnel and started yelling and voicing their objection to decisions made by the leadership of the House. Matt Gaza, Trump supporter, led the action, has tried to enter the room last week, but was turned away because he was not a member of any of the committees. Democratic Representative Steve Lynch, she's from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who was allowed to attend a deposition as a member of the House Oversight Committee, said Cooper did not testify, and aides said the day's impeachment-related proceedings were suspended for the time being. And Cooper, of course, is a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia, and was expected to face questions about the decision. This is a holding of the $391 million from the Ukraine. And much of the administration reaction here is it never ends. The D-nothing Democrats, these are just flippables, campaign or slogans, and any sane person would never believe these kinds of statements. And the case is dead. Well, the case is not dead. There's no doubt about that. It continues on. And before the storming, is what Reuters call it, some of these same characters appeared before the press, denouncing the impeachment process as a joke, a railroad job, Soviet style. That would allude to a Star Chamber type activity, but this is beyond that. Of course, it was triggered by a whistleblower complaint, and not unusual there. So far, few Trump fellow conservatives have appeared inclined towards his removal, though there have been some cracks in support. John Thune, he's from South Dakota. Anyway, number 2 Republican told reporters that the picture painted by Taylor's testimony based on the reporting that we have seen is not a good one. Well, there's more and more people thinking that. There's an effort in the Senate by old man McConnell and I think about 40 others to sign a statement denouncing the hearings. Well, again, this thing goes on and on and on and on. Let's go to the West Coast here. More than 500,000 California customers face power outages. Hundreds of thousands of acres are burning both in the north and the south of California. So this goes on. Now you have Pacific Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison involved here. Been denounced by the governor of California. 300,000 customers in 7 counties, including Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and Ventura, in the south are under the public safety shutoff. That's in Southern California. And the PGE has shut off power in 15 counties. It's 178,000 customers in those areas. That is Mateo County and Kern County. And San Diego Gas and Electric has identified 41,000 customers there. So this is all over the state of California. This is a new tactic here. And in addition, 730,000 homes and workplaces were cut off in Northern California earlier this month. And a lot of residents, they interviewed one resident in Sonora County, where we're talking about the possibility of this becoming an everyday occurrence, or an occurrence that is random there. That is 65 miles north of San Francisco. So more and more acreages are burning there, and some of these acreages are acreages that have burned in the past. Let's go to, let's see who is up next here. We have some polling here, and we'll look at some polls, and we have the University of Virginia's Larry Sabato's shop here, and we'll talk about the World Series, the Nationals. The series moves to national stadiums in Washington, D.C. And amazingly, the Nationals are up 2-0 in that series, a series heavily favored by the bookies, but heavily favored the Houston Astros by the bookies in Las Vegas. So we'll talk some about it, and that'll be later tonight. That what will happen, and we'll have a special on the World Series. We're working there, and we'll see where we go on that particular item. And let's see. We'll come back there, find Larry Sabato's shop here as quickly as we can, and where it is. Let's see. I don't think. No. These are polls. Just a second here. We normally queue this up ahead of time, but in this event we did not queue it up. We went a little bit differently than we would normally go here, and here we are. Just to take a second here. We'll get Sabato and company up here. This is the crystal ball, Larry Sabato's crystal ball. This is a guest columnist on the 24th of October, 2019. This is Louis Jacobson. We're pleased this week to welcome Louis Jacobson to the crystal ball. Jacobson, a veteran political journalist and analyst, is joining Crystal Ball as a senior columnist, and will be writing a monthly columns for ongoing state-level politics. In his debut, he takes a look at the impact of the Trump's administration tariff policy in 2020, and looking at several states here. We've done similar things as a senior. He's a senior correspondent, Jacobson, at fact-checking PolitiFact, and was also senior author of the 2016, 18, and 20 Almanac of American Politics. Very good. We refer to it many times. That is the Almanac of American Politics. And he also goes back to 2000, 2004. Key points here: farmers and manufacturers account for a particularly large share of the economy in key battleground states, including ones that DJ Trump won in 2016 and would need to win again in 2020 to secure re-election. However, the farm and factory sectors are facing economic strains from tariff policies. Agriculture output has declined between 2017 and 2018, but in fact they were already declining prior to that because of pricing. Those states across the board, 17, 18, show signs of slowing in most states during Q1 of 2019. That said, anecdotal evidence suggests that cultural issues outweighing economic factors, with these solidly Republican demographics sticking with the GOP. Poll after polls also have taken that. Trump's degree of risk was analyzed in 14 battleground states. 10 of them are won by Trump in 2016, 4 won by Hillary Clinton. We ignored Nebraska's competitive second district, and we looked only at Maine's statewide electoral votes, not its competitive second district. Well, that would be very minor in Maine. They have fallen back on the Bureau of Economic Analysis and calculated percentage of each state's gross domestic product coming from manufacturing and agriculture. We then added these percentages together and ranked the states from dependent to least dependent. Note anything about these states. Trump won 7 of them in the last election, making the core of his electoral majority at special risk from fallout from the tariff regime. That in itself is very tenuous, because a tariff solution will be reached, no doubt, with China either prior to 2020 or in early 2020, at least partially. Now let's look at these states here. And we'll start with Iowa. Manufacturing a share of GDP that is 18.8%. Wisconsin the same. Michigan 19.4%. That's very interesting. One would have ventured that Michigan would have much higher percentage of manufacturing than, say, Iowa or particularly Iowa. North Carolina is 18.3%. Also, Ohio 16.6%. Minnesota 14.3%. Texas just 13%. And Pennsylvania 11.9%. We will call that 12%. We won't quibble. And the average in the U.S. is 11.4%. New Hampshire 11.6%. Georgia 11%, and Maine 9.8%. Arizona 8.6%, and Florida very low in terms of manufacturing at 5.4%, and Nevada at 4.9%. And agricultural share in these states, Iowa, you would thought Iowa with all of its corn 3.8%, Wisconsin just 1.3%, 0.5% in Michigan, North Carolina 0.9%, and 0.4% in Ohio, Minnesota 1.4%. And Texas just 0.5%. And let's see here. Pennsylvania, 4/10 there, 8/10 is the U.S. as a whole. That is for share of agricultural GDP. And we'll go down to Nevada, just 1/10%. Florida, 6/10. Arizona, 8/10, and Maine, 1.3/10. And manufacturing shares there of GDP, agriculture shares of GDP, 22% is 6% in Iowa, 20% in Wisconsin, very big, and 19.9% in Michigan, 19.2% in North Carolina, 17% in Ohio, 15.7% in Minnesota, and 13.5% in Texas, 12.3% in Pennsylvania. And the average is 12.2% for the entire U.S., 11.9% in New Hampshire, 11.7% in Georgia, and Maine, 11.1%, Arizona, 9.4%. A lot of agricultural products there. And we don't see California in here at all. And anyway, Florida, just 6%. Very large state, a lot of citrus grown in Florida, and Nevada 5%. And those states Trump won: Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, in North Carolina, and Ohio. Clinton, of course, had Minnesota, and Texas, and Pennsylvania. And Clinton had New Hampshire. Trump got Georgia, Arizona, Trump, and then Florida, and of course Nevada for Clinton. Only one state's agricultural production grow between 17 and 18. Agricultural growth in key states. And we look at two other Trump states, Ohio. Iowa also fared worse than the national average. Percentage in Georgia was 3%, and in Texas a negative 1.1%. In Minnesota, negative 1. U.S. average a negative 4.1, excuse me. Negative 4.3 in Maine, and Ohio, negative 4.4, negative 4.5 in Iowa. New Hampshire, negative 5. That was one that Clinton won. So it's a lot of negatives here. And if we go to Florida, negative 5.8, Pennsylvania, negative 5.6. But makes a little difference in terms of where manufacturing growth. In Nevada, it moved on. It was 18.2. Arizona, 8.2. And Michigan, these are Trump states, 7.7. It's going to be less now because of the GM strike. We have to bring it in. Now unions are taking it to the membership. And some of the larger locals, there was one larger local in the South that has evidently rejected the proposed settlement. And so we'll see how that turns out. Some of the smaller ones are voting in favor of it. Wisconsin, a manufacturing percentage change there, 5.3. North Carolina, 4.6. Florida, 5.8. We'll just give some of these counties here. Minnesota 3.5, Pennsylvania 3.5. These are the Trump places, and of course Texas. Most recent manufacturing growth in key states, 10 battleground states showed lower annotated manufacturing growth in Q1 of this year than they saw in previous full year. Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and all of those states are questioned in the re-election campaign of DJ Trump. A key question, though, is whether this will matter electorally. When we check with political observers in these states, they say that the losses amongst farm and factors pose a risk. Not as much from the University of North Iowa. Christopher Lammer, who called this the fundamental question heading into 2020, said he has yet to see anything that would suggest voters are going to abandon the GOP in significant numbers. And no doubt he is correct in that situation in Texas. A Democratic nominee too far to the left could doom the party, even if it consolidates its gains during the Trump era. That is from political scientist Mark Jones at Rice University. Progressive policies targeted against traditional energy sector would be enough, to say nothing of political issues as guns, etc. This would be enough to keep Texas in the Trump column, even amongst some negative grumbling there in Texas. There's no doubt about that. Trump's allies aren't without a case to make. They are essentially arguing no plan, no gain, no pain, no gain. That is from Bill Bollinger, publisher of the Bollinger Report, a newsletter in Michigan. Pain and gain. It's sort of like they're going to a gym to lose weight. Democrats still have not been regularly counting the working class, except for occasional forays into places they predominate. He said, let me get back. This is Terry Madonna. He's director of the Franklin and Marshall College poll in Pennsylvania. One unknown is whether Democrats make a play for this demographic group. Democrats still haven't been regularly counting on it, no doubt about that. In Pennsylvania, he said Democrats' gains seem more likely to come from Republicans in the suburban areas turning against the president. Depressed turnouts amongst dissatisfied farmers and factory workers might be more likely than actual switches of blue-collar Republicans there. That's very difficult to ascertain. We don't expect, we at Ouija Board, that is our model, don't expect people in these areas not to turn out. In fact, we expect them to turn out. Craig Gilbert, a political journalist for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, has reported extensively from swing rural areas of western and southwestern Wisconsin. He said he hasn't encountered any sign of mass defection from the historic strong levels of Trump support in 2016. He added it remains an open question whether more modest shifts could occur. Trump could lose some folks on the margins, especially those more purple and swing rural places where he made big gains, but they aren't ambitious. The trending Republican Gilbert says the bottom line, Trump's trade policy could weaken his support in key states, but now at least there's little evidence there. Well, there's little evidence. Let me explain basically what's going on here. Many of these states have alternative economies or economies there. For instance, around the Des Moines area, they're heavily engaged in the insurance business, education business, other things that highlight them. And of course, as you move around the Midwest into places like Wisconsin, it varies there. Yes, the farmers are there in Wisconsin, but there's also manufacturing, there's also construction, and depending on what part of the state, for instance, if you're up in Milwaukee, those extra birds there, people are working in the Chicago area, which is doing okay, and coming back into those extra birds that are closer to Chicago, within 100 miles or so of Chicago. And then the other parts of the state that are closer to Minnesota, people are working in Minnesota, particularly in Minnesota state government, in St. Paul, Minnesota, and places of that nature. So that is different, whereas even in Iowa, you have people there that are working at the Mayo Clinic complex that is in southern Minnesota. So there are some differences there, and of course in the northern part of the state, you have the mining mineral issues going on there, taconite and various other minerals, and of course some of those parent companies. One, I forget the name, it's in Ohio, that is building a new unit, and when it comes online, of course they more than $1 billion. We don't know, incidentally, what happened to that plant that was going online by the Chinese conglomerate in around Milwaukee. So it's not there. So we just don't know. Let's get to some of the polling here, and we'll get a little clearer picture of where we are, or perhaps as some would say, where we aren't. And then we'll get over to the nationals and what is going on there. Let's start out here with real clear politics. Now we'll start looking at some of these broader polls. Tomorrow night, on the week that was, we'll have more polls and review some of these polls. Nonetheless, we'll start. Anyway, we'll do the CNN poll here. This is a national poll. According to it, the Democratic race, Biden's ahead by 15 points. He's at 34. And Liz Warren at 19. Bernie at 16. Buttigieg at 6 in single digits there. Harris at 6 also. And Amy Klobuchar has 3 there. Santa Booker has 1. Beto is at 3 also in this national poll. Another one, the YouGov poll, Biden is up by 1. That's an internet poll. He's at 24. Warren is at 23. Bernie's at 16. South Bend, Pete is at 8. Harris is at 5. Beto is at 2. Senator Booker is at 3 in this poll. And Ms. Gabbard of Hawaii is at 2. She's come up in this YouGov poll. Then we go to South Carolina. This is a Biden shop here. He's up by 17. Liz Warren at 16. Bernie at 12. Harris at 6 there. Klobuchar's at 2. Bernie's at 1. Tulsi Gabbard is at 1 also. And in the state of Wisconsin, this is Marquette University in Milwaukee. Biden is up by 7. He has 31. Liz Warren has 24. Bernie has 17. Harris has 5. South Bend Pete, the little Pete, has 7. And Amy Klobuchar of Florida State, she has to do much better here than 3. Marianne Williamson has 1 there. So, there we go. And to the Commonwealth itself of Massachusetts, Warren's up by 15. You would expect that. Biden has 18. Bernie has 13. Little Pete has 7. Harris has 3. Again, Kelsey Gabbard has 2. And so forth and so on. And we break this down in terms of where the people are. This is CNN. Here, Biden's up by 10. Liz Warren's up by 8. Bernie's up by 9. Bernie has consistently run better than most people in these national polls. The little judge is up by 6 over DJ Trump. In the state of Wisconsin, Biden is up by 6 over DJ Trump. Warren's up by 1. Bernie does a little better. He's up by 2. South Bend is behind. Trump is up by 2 there. To Mississippi, the only one we have there have Reeves and Hood. Hood is a Democrat. This is Mason Dixon. Reeves is up by 3. Tighter race than we would have expected there. Quinnipiac on Wednesday had Quinnipiac, I should say, had DJ Trump at 38. Morning Consult at 41. Down everything. Even old Rasmussen has him at 44. YouGov at 43. We gave the Emerson polls. Here it's kind of interesting. Emerson, will you give us the last one? This is on Tuesday. Biden had 27. Liz Warren had 21. This is a national poll from Emerson Polling across the street from the Common. And Bernie Sanders had 25 in that particular poll. Senator Booker had 3. Beto O'Rourke at 2. Tulsi Gabbard's up in these polls. She got a bounce because of the fight with the Hillary Monster Clinton. It has 3 in this poll, which is good for her. Needs to do a little better, and she can get into some of the debates. We'll see if we can. We may be able to jump a little bit into the Morning Consult here. I'm not certain about that at all. And Emerson, this is their national poll here. We'll do a little bit of it, I suppose. Basically, the national poll says Joe Biden at 27, Bernie at 25, Liz Warren at 21. No other candidate cleared 6%. They left it at that. Small shift from the September poll. I had Biden at 25, Warren at 23, and Sanders at 22. Bernie actually went up in this poll. Sanders continues to dominate the 18 to 29-year-old with 45%, followed by Warren at 17. Andrew Yang at 15. As the voters get older, Sanders' support drops with 21% among the 30 to 29-year-olds, only 15% above 15 to 64, and 6% of our age group, 65 or older. Biden is more popular with older workers, receiving 15% of support from young people, 17 from the 30 to 39-year-olds, and 44% for 50 and older. Warren continues similar support of those under 50 and those over 50. Very interesting. Biden leads amongst people who voted for Clinton with 42%, followed by Warren with 16%, followed by Bernie with 14%. Bernie and Warren are pretty close together in that one. Research assistant Brendan Kane points out that in order to create a winning coalition in the primary, Sanders will need to win back more voters who support him. 216, no doubt about that. He's working on it. From Warren than he's currently receiving. Sanders also leads amongst very and somewhat liberal voters with 30%, followed by Warren with 25%, Biden with 21%. Amongst moderate and conservative voters, Biden is at 36%, followed by Sanders and Warren. Something we do look at. DJ Trump's numbers are down 5% from last month at 47. Disapprove of him. Most important issue for voters deciding that followed the economy, 31%, followed by socialist issues at 14, healthcare at 13. The impeachment again is very, very lower at 11% in this one. Immigration at 10%, the environment at 8%, guns and education 4%. Foreign policy least important at only 4%. Democrats, the second most important issue to them. Do their vote for president is impeachment at 19% there. From Dr. Kimball, he's director of polling, concludes that shifts in priority of issues appears to be Democrats are moving their focus from health care to impeachment. The challenge for Democrats to be convinced independents for impeachment is a very important issue. The economy is the most important issue for Republican voters, 45%, independents 28%. Compared among Democrats at 24%. That's interesting there where the economy is going. Manufacturing, of course, in the U.S. is in a recession. Even Amazon took a bite at the stock market ticker. Amazon evidently is souping up the delivery time from 2-day, that's Prime, to 1-day delivery. More products are getting closer to the people. Several Democratic candidates have suggested a buyback. That's on assault weapon, gun policy. A plurality of 46% oppose any type of assault weapon buyback, while 31% support it. Voters split on Trump's position to withdraw troops from Syria, with 40% in support, 39% oppose it, and 2% unsure. Voters strongly oppose 70% employers to be allowed to change or eliminate health care insurance against employers' wishes, or employees' issues there, and of course caller ID in this particular poll played a very important part. Let's get to our, we'll just go here. We'll do the sport. This will occur later today in Washington, D.C. This is from the Houston Chronicle. We'll get their take on it. The headline here shows old Justin Verlander here reacts after giving up a home run to Washington's catcher Kurt Suzuki during the seventh inning of the second game. This game, incidentally, was tied up. It's the second game of the series at Minute Maid Park. Evidently, old Verlander didn't drink his Minute Maid. Sellout crowd started to exit at 10:07 as the 72 hellish hellish hours in Houston neared an end, and this World Series slipped away from the hometown team. Deep in the heart of Texas blurred, stars stumble off the field, neither big nor bright on their sports' biggest stages. An implosion befitting these three disastrous days was done. Hosting the world's highest power, the World Series stage, the Astros butchered almost every aspect of 3-day display inside Minute Maid Park. A top baseball operation executive remained in hot water over his so-called exuberance of against a female reporter. We'll get that in a minute. His bosses remain silent, save an 11-minute appearance on the right holder radio show. Anyway, the heaviest World Series favorite since 2007, Houston aligned its 2 acres for start against a streaky team coming off a 6-day layoff. The luxury would relinquish by the most. The Houston Astros wasted after an embarrassing 12-3 loss. On Wednesday, that was in Houston, the Astros are losing 2 losses from elimination of the 3 games in national parks loom. And Jared Cole and Verlander are burned. Washington's scored 6 times in an awful 7th inning. 10 men came to the bat. 7 reached. A sacrifice blunt spared the Houston of an additional ignominies, giving them an out they appeared unable to procure on their own. The offense is absent, only able to muster 1 clinch hit per playoff game. That is Alex Bregman's 2-run homer during the first, and Bregman admired prodigious shot for 4th second. Walked up the first base and started his trot. Now, he probably should have crawled. Life was present in the sold-out stadium, one that has so little for which to root in the ensuing 8 innings. Anyway, nonetheless, Houston finished the game 0-5 with runners in scoring position. They stranded 9 base runners, prolonged any abyss trait that permeated their postseason. Houston is 17 for 87 with runners in scoring position across 13 playoff games. Therefore, their starters to next to no margin for errors. Again, elite teams, it is unsavory recipe for success. Verlander grind through 6 innings with just 2 runs of support. First issues again plagued his outing. But first, that's not unusual, though. Some pitchers have that problem. Verlander misfired on the game's first 4 pitches, allowing Trace Turner to take first base and the sellout crowd to temper. Adam Eaton struck a single down the third base line, putting 2 aboard before Verlander could catch breath. Anthony Rendon ready to face the ace. Rendon's presence is one of this series' most sensational subplots. He was born in Houston, attended Lamar High School, played for Wayne Graham at Rice. Rendon shuns the spotlight. He encountered Verlander after a quiet Tuesday. He went, this is Rendon went 1 for 4 with a forgotten single. Verlander raced ahead 2-zip. He chose a pathway changeup. Rendon rifled it off the left field scoreboard. 2 runs and tied the game up there. So there we go. And Mr. Suzuki stood in. He entered the day 1 for 23 in post play. A second inning single off of Verlander gave him a reprieve. A second 7th inning home run began the collapse of Verlander's grooved fastball, and Suzuki went on to Crawford boxes. A walk to Victor Robles ended Verlander's night and continued the combustion there. Third baseman Alex Bregman booted 2 balls. The official scores somewhat ruled out 1 base as a hit. And a 2 bouncer from Howie Kendall that Bregman often feels at relatively ease. It said Bregman bounced into a hole and didn't secure the baseball. He didn't even ball a throw. Robles has scored the final run of Verlander's pathetic situation there. Let me just briefly this manager. You won't spend much time on him because he should be censured or fired or whatever they do with him. This involves female reporters. This is their GM, Daryl Morey. Controversial tweet sparked reaction from, this is Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. You'll hear it here. Daryl Morey's tweet has sparked international incident. The general manager posted a now deleted tweet that was Friday evening expressing support for pro-democracy. This is a rocket. Sorry about that. Protesters in Hong Kong. Wrong official here. He didn't intend to offend the Chinese. Following Morey's tweet, the Chinese Basketball Association, chaired by former Rocket star there Yao Ming, publicly declared it would suspend all exchange and cooperation with the Rockets. In addition, the NBA's Chinese partner suspended their ties with the franchise. It wasn't a good day there. Now, across the U.S., the heavy hitters in the political world, business world, so forth and so on, wide-ranging specters of sports and international business. Above, you can see a list of individuals there, including Beto and Ted Cruz and Julian Castro. Incidentally, Julian Castro is in trouble financially, and his campaign is, and he may be disappearing soon. Mike Bass, he is the NBA's chief communication officer, released a statement criticizing Morey, now deleted Twitter, which simultaneously claimed the league would support individual rights to to publicly state their opinions. And this is it. Protests, which has been widespread in Hong Kong, initially well related there. Anyway, this is Peter Dawson, a digital reporter with the Houston paper. So that's one of those situations here that they walked into. A picture of all of them yelling there, and Beto and company have gotten into it. Let's go now to the Washington Post as we kind of teeter along here a little bit on Friday Jobber, as we usually I'm not sure. Well, let's go. Okay, we had wanted to go here to the Nationals comments here, and for some reason we're not exactly where we want to be. Bring up the Washington Post here. Some of the headlines to deal with here, and let's just make sure that we have the latest from the Post. Nationals are crushed the Astros, their headline, to return home with a 2-1 lead here. Some perspectives here on what the Nationals are not, and the word crushed here. The Nationals, another perspective here from the Post. The Nationals are meeting the World Series moment, and the Astros are shirking it from it. Well, we'll see on that one. These games can turn, and do sometimes turn heavily favored teams, though. We go to a third meeting here in a national park. Now, what this means basically is Houston will have to win at least one game here, two games actually in Washington. The next three are in Washington to come out of this out. And depending on what happens later today in Washington, if they get behind 3-1, the Houston Astros, they are doomed. They would be down 3-1. That's virtually impossible to come back from. And the Washington Nationals, of course, being a wild card team, if they win tonight, it'd be 2-1. But then again, they play on Saturday. The Nationals could come back once again, and then we have a 3-1 series and a 4-1 series and what have you. So in other words, the cards are not good for where the Nationals should be or could be here. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's not problematic that they would be able to catch up. Still having trouble with the feed from the Washington Post. Not sure why this is happening to us, and we're still having our little problems here. So we're still lurking here. For whatever reason, we bow out of this in one piece, perhaps. And our lineup here, we'll have Numbers Man Show, which is our macroeconomics presentation. We will be talking about what is going on in various places as we look more and more here. Toward the economic situation. We'll try to answer some of those questions about the Trump support in the hinterland. We went over some of those actually in the past, and it hasn't gotten any better, so to speak, there. Let me just I don't think, no, we don't. I was thinking perhaps we would have and we don't. We don't have the odds here either. Anyway, tomorrow night we will have all of that, the odds. Incidentally, on the political scene, Elizabeth Warren is still still leading, I should say, with the various bookies there. So she is ahead in that category, but it's getting a little bit closer. We'll get that on the Week It Was tomorrow night. Incidentally, you can find us on our RSS feed on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, YouTube. We're going to start making more emphasis over on YouTube. Anyway, this will do it for us. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you World Series. We'll happy, so to speak, on the Week It Was tomorrow, on Saturday.